All right, guys. So free agency is over. So now we can go ahead and get into some draft talk, man. And look, a few things that are going on with the Jaguars. The Jaguars, first of all, had the number 5 overall pick. So, of course, at number 5 overall, there is a bit of uncertainty on who you're going to pick. But at the same time, there is a pretty small pool of players that we feel pretty good about that the Jaguars will most likely draft, and really it's all over the place. I mean, the Jaguars kind of seemingly have holes all over the roster and a lot of places that they can definitely get better. But with that said, they should be able to get a lot better at the number 5 overall pick. And also, there's plenty of draft capital going on here, right? Got a second round pick, 2 third round picks, 2 fourth round picks. So the Jaguars do have a plethora of picks at their disposal that they can kind of do a lot of stuff with. So with that said, when you look at it, the teams that are drafting ahead of the Jaguars are the Titans, Browns, Giants, and Patriots. So those are the 4 teams ahead of the Jaguars, and the 2 teams behind the Jaguars are the Raiders and Jets. And, the reason why I bring up the 2 teams behind us is in case of a trade back, because the dream scenarios for the Jaguars are that quarterbacks go early, right? Because the Jaguars are obviously not in the market to get a quarterback. So as Jaguar fans, we're kind of hoping that Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders, go in the top 4. So that's going to push up the best available player for the Jaguars. So they can essentially, at worst, get the 3rd best non-quarterback on their board, which should help the Jaguars significantly. And there's also potential that, maybe it might work out better if only one quarterback goes and then all of a sudden, Shadur Sanders, for example, is available at pick number 5 overall, and then the Jaguars are able to potentially move back with the Jets or the Raiders if they want to jump each other to kind of get a quarterback. Now, what do those teams want to do at quarterback? Each of them kind of has journeyman quarterbacks. The Jets have young quarterback in Justin Fields that obviously didn't work out very well for the Bears. Doesn't feel like he really got a good shot with the Steelers, so we'll see if the Jets really want to really give him the opportunity to truly be the starter, or if they already look to replace him in this draft. Or the Raiders, who, they have Geno Smith, who it is to be noted that Geno Smith is reuniting with Pete Carroll, who they do have a relationship together. But, Geno Smith, I think, is in his upper 30. I think he's like 35 years old or something like that. So, he's only getting older. So you got to think that they will look to potentially want to get a younger guy. So those are a couple things, and, those are a couple dream scenarios. Now, with this video, I don't want to overcomplicate things, okay? I want to kind of give you guys a list of names that are being floated around there for the Jaguars and talk about, will the Jaguars make the move or will they not? So, let's go ahead and get this thing going. So the first prospect we have to talk about is a guy that probably will not be there, that is Abdul Carter. Now, Abdul Carter is, in all these different mock drafts, it's seeming like Abdul Carter is always the first non-quarterback off the board. And, it's pretty much, at worst, he goes number 3, right? He's always, in every single mock draft, he's the first non-quarterback off the board. So, he's an edge rusher out of Penn State. He is most likely the next top edge rusher coming out in the NFL. So, with that said, Jaguars really have no chance of drafting him, so I'm really not going to waste too much time on this guy. Now, the next guy we got to talk about is Travis Hunter, who is cornerback, wide receiver, and most notably called athlete on these different websites out of Colorado. Now, we all know who Travis Hunter is. I know when the Jaguars were doing awful, we were all kind of saying, all right, tank for Travis. We got to get Travis Hunter. And with that said, he's a unicorn. Like a lot of times if he's a wide receiver, he's the best wide receiver out there. He's a cornerback, he's the best cornerback out there. I know with me, if the Jaguars were to draft him, I would like to use him as a cornerback and then, get different packages in for him at wide receiver where we can really use his strengths, because I just feel like you got to be an every down cornerback and you don't really need to waste too many snaps out there at wide receiver, because there's no reason he's not going to be able to get 100% of the snaps on each side of the ball. It's just not going to be sustainable. So with that said, at first it seemed like it was impossible to get him, right? And the reason why I'm bringing him up is that there's a lot of smoke coming recently about Travis Hunter falling to the Jaguars. And a big reason for that is that the Patriots are really rumored to be kind of going after Will Campbell out of LSU. Because when you look at the Patriots, like, they have a huge hole right now, left tackle. They signed Morgan Moses to play right tackle, but they really need to shore up that offensive line, especially for Drake May, because they want to be able to give him some protection, to be able to get the most out of him going into his second year. So with this said, like, a lot of when the mock drafts fall to him, it pretty much goes in some order of quarterback, Abdul Carter, that's the top three. Then Will Campbell at number 4. And then Travis Hunter kind of falls into the Jaguars' lap at pick number 5 overall. This would be something that would be really exciting if it was to happen because, look, he would be a real X factor for the Jaguars. And, if they can get a guy like him, I think everybody would be really excited. So, with that said, he adds a lot of versatility. You can kind of play him all over the ball, and he can play on both sides of the ball. So, with that said, being able to lock down one of these top cornerbacks that you can use as a wide receiver too, or even if you want to use him as a wide receiver because the Jaguars have a need at wide receiver too, you can pretty much do whatever you want with him. He's a chess piece, and I'll be fascinated to see what the Jaguars do, not only if they draft him, but where they would play him if they drafted him. Now, speaking of Will Campbell, we'll go ahead and talk about him next because he is a guy that is being mocked to the Jaguars. Now, he is an offensive tackle out of LSU, and with that said, some of his profiling is that he does have the ideal frame for a left tackle, but the main thing that he needs to do is add weight. He's an athletic player, but a lot of experts out there are kind of projecting him to be more of a guard just because of his arm length, which I don't want to hype up too much arm length or spend too much time on that because I think when we hear this term arm length at this time of year, we're starting to get a little bit of PTSD from, our boy Trent Baalke, that was basically the main decider on if you wanted the guy was arm length. But, with that said, Will Campbell, if the Jaguars get him in, they have Walker Little at left tackle. They have Anton Harrison at right tackle. They also have Ezra Cleveland at left guard. So, there could be some room for him to come in and start over a guy or potentially be a backup for a year, right? Or just compete at left tackle. I would think if the Jaguars get him, left tackle would be a spot and he would compete with Walker Little. But we'll kind of see what happens there. Now, I think the most commonly mocked guy to the Jaguars is defensive tackle out of Michigan, Mason Graham. Now, if you look at this, let's take a step back and really take a look at what the Jaguars have done and what they have said. Like James Gladstone, Tony Baselli, Liam Cohen have all talked about trenches. You got to invest in the trenches. We got to get tough in the trenches. If you look at what the Jaguars did in free agency on the offensive line, they've added Patrick McCarry, Robert Hainsey, Chuma Edoga, and Fred Johnson, right? 4 offensive linemen have been added to the Jaguars' offensive line. What have they done to the defensive line? Absolutely nothing. All they've done is lost Jeremiah Ledbetter. So, in a defensive line that needs to get better, they didn't do anything in free agency to make that better. So that's one reason why it feels like they will probably go defensive line heavy in the draft. And that's why if Mason Graham is there at number 5, he would probably be the most likely guy, especially if Travis Hunter is not there. I would think that they're going to run to the board and pick this guy. So with that said, one thing, the thing that's so intriguing about Mason Graham is just he's just a disruptive defensive lineman. His pro comp has been Christian Wilkins, and he's just a natural football player. And there are some knocks at him, and it's mainly because arm length, right? Maybe a little bit undersized. But who is also undersized is Aaron Donald. So I don't want to go too much into all these measurables because, he's one of these guys that when he actually turned on the game film, he pops out. And I don't want to hear anybody say Taven Bryan 2.0 because not even Gator fans knew who Taven Bryan was when the Jaguars drafted him, right? He's just a big white defensive lineman. But, man, when you actually watch this guy, he's disruptive. He has different moves to get to the ball. He, manhandles some of these offensive linemen. And, we always go back to what the Philadelphia Eagles did in the Super Bowl, just absolutely harassed Patrick Mahomes and gave the best quarterback of all time no time in the world, right? They didn't give him any opportunity. So Mason Graham is really intriguing there as an interior defensive lineman. The Jaguars have a couple good edge rushers in Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen. Eric Armstead going to move to the interior. Also, we're going to see what we get out of Mason Smith going into year 2. But, Mason Graham is an immediate impact player that the Jaguars could get at pick number 5 overall. Now, next up, we can go ahead and look at wide receiver Ted McMillan out of Arizona. Now, a big reason why maybe the Jaguars would want to invest in a wide receiver early on is because you guys see how free agency goes. It is impossible to get a good wide receiver in free agency. I mean, they are never available. whenever a guy becomes available and they're not able to get a contract done, they franchise tag the crap out of him, like what happened with, T. Higgins. Like, when was the last time a really good wide receiver was just out there and available in free agency? Quite frankly, it doesn't happen. So that's one reason why bringing in a Ted McMillan and drafting a wide receiver here, it gives you something really cool, and that is just incredibly cheap wide receivers going forward. Like, if you look at, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase now, they are getting paid boatloads of money, right? But the Jaguars wouldn't have to worry about paying Brian Thomas Jr. or Ted McMillan for 3-4 years, right? So it really frees up money to really allocate elsewhere. And when you look at Ted McMillan, 6'4", he's quick, shifty, he's a true 50-50 ball winner. And, if you're able to get a really good, another impactful wide receiver at this spot, like, there really are no more excuses for Trevor Lawrence, right? I know I've kind of been a Trevor Lawrence apologist, but with that said, you bring him two big-time wide receivers. You got a good offensive-minded guy around him. You hopefully get a little bit better at the offensive line. I'd imagine the run game can only get better. Now it's finally time for him to really show what he can do, and this would be really something. And what's interesting is that, Ted McMillan, he was always projected top 10 pick, but something's happened in the last week or two where now he's falling. I looked at Pete Prisco's mock draft this morning. He had him falling to pick number 29 overall to the Washington Commanders. So, with that said, wide receiver this year is a little bit weird. Last year, I think, 6, 7, or 8 wide receivers went in the first round. It won't be quite the same this year. I think at most 3 wide receivers go in the first round. It hasn't been as much of a wide receiver rich draft as the last few years. But, with that said, Ted McMillan would definitely be intriguing option for the Jaguars at number 5 overall. And it would also be, I guess, pretty exciting too, right? So the last prospect we'll talk about for the Jaguars at number 5 overall is running back Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State. Now, he is kind of widely being regarded as the best prospect in the draft. But as we all know, he's a running back. And running backs are just extremely devalued in the NFL. And with that said, it doesn't feel like this would be the move, just because if anyone's heard Tony Baselli on Jaguar radio, he's always talking about, like, I don't want running back higher in the first round. You got to invest in the trenches. So it doesn't feel like this would be a move, but it is a guy, like, if you want to get truly a blue chip prospect, a guy that is just really, really good at his job, that's what Ashton Jeanty is. And if you look at the Jaguars rushing ranks the last 2 years, in 2023, you're 24th. In 2024, you're 26th in rushing yards. So, and most importantly, the Jaguars just could never get a yard when they needed to get a yard. And I'm having bad flashbacks of 2024. What a terrible season, right? But look, we're moving on. We got a new staff, new regime. Everything will be better. But, with Ashton Jeanty, he's a guy that's hard to tackle. He has insane contact balance, really good combination of power and agility, and he has exceptional vision. So with that said, if you want to talk about negatives on him, the only really knocks are that he played at Boise State, and the Boise State didn't really give him all that many opportunities in a pass game. But I think a big thing about Ashton Jeanty is why, even though he's really good, maybe a reason why, if you're a really, really running back needy team, why maybe not draft him, is that this is a really deep running back class, right? It's the deepest class since probably 2017, when it was like Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook. All those guys went in that draft. It's being talked about as one of those drafts. So with that said, that might push the urgency to be able to get an Ashton Jeanty or a running back in that sense down just a little bit. Now, with all that said, let me go ahead and say this. I can pretty much be sold on a lot of these guys. I don't have too many strong takes when it comes to the NFL draft, just because I really like the GM to kind of do their thing, especially when I don't know them very well. So, whoever James Gladstone picks, I'll be behind, just because, I'm going to give this guy the benefit of the doubt until he proves otherwise. And with that said, I know last year, like, there was a big wide receiver versus cornerback debate, and I know I was big on wanting Brian Thomas Jr., but because I don't know, I just thought he was going to be a beast, and I thought Jaguars need a wide receiver a little bit more than cornerback. But this year is going to be different. Whoever the Jaguars get, I'll kind of be behind. But if I were to rank it, gun to head, if I were to rank this, I would say Number one, I want Travis Hunter. Number two, Mason Graham. Number three, probably a Will Campbell. Number four, Ted McMillan, and then number five, Ashton Jeanty. That would probably be how I would rank different guys most likely to go to, the Jaguars. I just feel like the Jaguars won't go offensive line in the first round with what they did in free agency. It feels like, Mason Graham will most likely be there at number five or some kind of combination of that. I would expect two quarterbacks to go in the top four. So with that said, the Jaguars seem like they'll get their choice of Abdul Carter, who will most likely be going, or Travis Hunter or Mason Graham is what it kind of feels like it's going to happen. That's the early read on things. We'll see how everything plays out, but it will be fascinating. We all like the NFL draft, and with free agency set, we can kind of now sit down and take a look forward to see what the Jaguars will do and what makes sense. So appreciate all you guys for sticking with me. No, I've been a little bit slow into content, but have a 2-week-old baby at home. So, with that said, things are settling down. So definitely expect some more content down to me. If you guys can, please drop a like for me on your way out, and go Jags.